Hey folks, before I jump into today's episode, I want to explain this bit of an episode shuffle that's happening this week and next. If you're a regular listener, you know that today's episode should be a House of Mouse headlines, bringing you the latest Disney news. But just hours after recording the House of Mouse headlines with Kyle, Disney and theater fans got the sad news that the voice of Oogie Boogie, Ken Page, passed away on September 30th, 2024, at the age of 70. Considering next week's episode featuring Ken was recorded just 15 days before his passing, making it one of his last interviews, if not the last, I decided to move it up a week in his honor. The House of Mouse headlines that should have been released today will be released next Wednesday, followed by another House of Mouse headlines the following week with more current Disney news. After that, the show will be back to its regular routine. This episode is dedicated to the memory of Ken Page, who couldn't have been sweeter or more jovial. It was a true joy spending a weekend with him. Happy October and happy Halloween, everyone! Today in the show, I have a very special group interview with talented folks who were involved in the making of The Nightmare Before Christmas. Featured in the discussion is the speaking voice of Jack Skellington, actor Chris Sarandon, the voice of Oogie Boogie, actor Ken Page, the film's artistic coordinator, Allison Abbate, and the film's co-producer, Kathleen Gavin. Join us as we discuss the making of this iconic holiday film and its legacy, live from Orange County, California's largest Halloween event, Creep It Real OC. This panel was recorded in front of a live audience at an active outdoor event on Sunday, September 15th, 2024, so you may notice some background noise for that reason. Now enjoy this special episode as the spooky season has officially begun.
Prepare for some insight. You've tuned in to an exclusive DCTC interview.
Any Nightmare Before Christmas fans in the crowd? Yeah! Great. Well, then you're in the right spot. I think let's just start with the earliest person who would have been working on this project, I think would have been Kathleen, right?
Yes.
Pull the mic up close to you so folks can hear you.
Hi, we good? What? People don't normally tell me they can't hear me.
Very true. Kathleen, how did you get involved with The Nightmare Before Christmas?
Oh, it's a long... No, at the time, I was working for the Walt Disney Company. I had a couple of things that I actually worked with Allison on Rescuers Down Under and Oliver and Company and a lot of shorts and things like that. I was actually in the room when Tim came and met with Michael Eisner to say, you own this art of mine that I did in the probably late 70s when he worked for the company, and he wanted to buy it back. Michael Eisner and the Walt Disney Company, not being, they were smart people, and they said, you know what, we'll do the movie with you. And so that's the origin of the movie, really? That Tim wanted to make the movie. Disney owned the art. All his designs of Sally and Jack and the storyline, Disney owned. And so they decided they would make the movie with Tim. And at some point I was approached about producing it. They weren't looking for a Disney producer because it was, at that time it's called a negative pick. It was an outside project that Disney was funding. And for some reason, they couldn't find a producer. And at first I said no. I know that's crazy. But at first I said no. And then they came back and they said, okay, you really have to pay attention now. And so I said yes. And that's how I got involved.
Awesome. And you said that you worked with Allison on the Rescuers Down Under.
Rescuers Down Under, yep.
And Allison, can you tell people what exactly is an artistic coordinator? What does that role mean?
Because I had been like an assistant production manager on Rescuers. So I always considered myself like I would go anywhere. I wanted to move to San Francisco. I thought Tim Burton was a great filmmaker and I loved Kathleen. So I went up and I just was coordinating every artistic department. And so after a while, after that 13th department or something that I was dealing with, we kind of coined the phrase of an artistic coordinator. But it really was just, we didn't know how to do stop motion. So it was really about getting to know the artists who were making the different artistic departments and helping to kind of coordinate it. One of the things that's great about this movie is there had never been a full-length feature stop motion film before. So we were really kind of making it up as we went along. And so it was really fun like I was literally on the ground floor of everything because we had to kind of figure it out as we went along. So
it was done in San Francisco for a number of reasons. Henry Selick, who directed Nightmare, had worked with Tim and had gone. I think they had worked at Cal Arts together as well.
Yep, and Dizney.
He was doing Pillsbury Doughboy commercials and Gumby's things, and so there was actually a community in San Francisco that LA didn't have of people who did stop motion. So it was, and we were talking about this. It was a great project because every day you came to work with people who their whole lives had wanted to do a stop motion movie, and they were so excited to be there. It was always joyful, difficult but joyful. So it was great.
Excellent. And we're going to brag for a second about Allison because she may have been the artistic coordinator of Nightmare Before Christmas, but she went on to produce.
She did some other things.
Quite a few Tim Burton films. Let's hear a little bit of the list.
I produced Corpse Bride with Tim and Frankenweenie. So that's fun. And then in between that, I did Fantastic Mr. Fox, which a lot of people
I love that movie.
like. So
Very cool.
Very good. Once you do stop motion, it's hard to go back because it is like making magic every minute of every day. So you get the bug.
Yeah, I want to talk about stop motion for a second. We'll start with Ken down at this end and work just the way down and talk about, I mean, it's insane. I'm sure everybody here knows how it works as far as, you move, you take a shot, 24 of those a second sort of thing. It's such a passion, right? But I'd love to just hear about, for me, I love that Nightmare Before Christmas is a holiday film because when I think stop motion, I think holidays, right? I think of those...
Rudolph the Red-Nosed
Reindeer. Exactly.
Yeah.
So I'd love to hear about your introduction to stop motion and or why you think it's so... has lasted. Even it's insane to think that it's still done, honestly, because it's so difficult.
Well, I think Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, maybe Gumby, some things like that were my first exposure to stop action. Of course, I had no idea that's what it was. It was just on NBC at Christmas time. And you watch it and you went, Rudolph's moving a little weird, but that's okay. So that was my introduction to it. And what was the second part of your question?
Why do you think it's lasted?
I think of it as an art form. I mean, there's a lot of things and a lot of areas in filmmaking that cross the thing from being something you do into it being an art form. And I think stop action is one of those things that I think that's why it's not done as often because it is an art form. Mm-hmm. With AI now you can imitate it, but that still doesn't mean that's the art form. Yeah. That's the way you imitate the art form, And Pinocchio, which was done, a couple of years ago now, was the first thing that I'd seen in a long time that came even close to Nightmare Before Christmas. And I think it's for the same reasons, that the director, whose name right now is not in my head.
Guillermo, right?
Guillermo del Toro, yeah. And he really was a fan and an ardent supporter and devotee of stop action. And I just read a wonderful article recently between he and Henry Selick going back and forth about their love of stop action and why they did it and so forth. And it's really fascinating because I think whether they know it or not, they've both given birth to someone out there is probably going to be the next ones to carry it forward because it is an art form. That's what I would say.
Before we move forward with Chris's answer, I just want to take a moment to just say we have Danny Elfman playing in the background right here with some Oingo Boingo.
He's always
if you guys
with
can hear it. Chris, how do you feel about that? Your introduction to stop motion and why you think it might have lasted so long?
I just can echo Ken in the sense that I don't think I was ever aware that I was watching stop motion. I certainly watched the Rudolph movie when I was a kid. And so this was just a totally different kind of experience for me. I mean, when I walked into the quote-unquote studio in San Francisco, it was a building, basically, right?
A warehouse. It was a warehouse.
Yeah. And as I recall, all the little sets were downstairs.
Yes.
And on the
on the
lower
stages,
level.
We had 18 stages, and then we went to 24, I think. We gave up our parking lot to do more
create
stages.
another stage?
Yes.
Wow. And the reason why, by the way, as I'm sure you guys know, the process is so slow. I mean, I went up every 3 months, I think, and recorded for a day. and did a bunch of scenes, and then I would come back 3 months later, and it took that long for them to animate just the scenes that I had done 3 months previously.
It's making a movie one frame at a time, which is not particularly efficient.
No. And there was, I was given the number, and I'm not sure if this is you guys would know. There was something like 11 seconds a week.
Oh,
I don't know. What were we doing?
They were probably,
Maybe per animator.
Maybe. I mean,
I don't know.
That sounds like a lot.
A lot of
That's a lot
it
of
does
frames.
sound like
That
a lot.
sounds like a
11
lot.
seconds is a lot.
Yeah.
I feel like
Whoa, I
on
thought we were
later
going the other way
movies,
there.
I would say you're talking like
Yeah, per
maybe 3,
animator.
4, because it's 24 frames per second.
Right, so you gotta
that's
do
a
24
lot
frames.
and every
Right.
setup.
And
is,
also, if you're doing one character,
yes,
that's pretty easy. Let's think the town square with all the citizens and stuff. That took forever.
Well,
Really just a mess.
So
Wow.
my reaction was that I got to see how it was done, and I thought, this is, I've never
Madness.
seen anything like this.
you
first of
say
all.
magic, I say nuts.
And
I said madness. The madness.
It's magic.
Madness.
It is magic.
Madness.
But it's magic of a very high order
Yeah.
in the sense that you have to conceptualize ahead of time.
Oh yes.
Yeah.
First of all, how it's gonna play, and also how the characters are gonna interact.
Yes.
And
has to be
the
up here
interrelationships of everything. I mean, the more I think about this as we talk, the more amazing to me it is that this got made.
Well, the thing that's kind of surprising to me is you're saying you were actually going to a location to see the sets and puppets, Chris.
But I
and-
was recording there.
Yeah,
as
but that's
well.
so fascinating that they would go through the trouble of bringing you to that location. I mean, these days,
That's where we recorded them.
Because you want it as the more engaged the character, the puppets, the actor, the voice, like it has to all be one. So again, it's a pleasure
Yeah, I mean,
to
I
bring
got
the
to go.
actors in.
Yeah, I got to go down and see where they were making the
Yeah.
costumes,
Yes.
and it also made me feel more
Yeah.
Yes.
integral to the
Yes.
project. And
would it be done that way today, do you think, where everything
Of course,
is...
as much
Yeah?
as you could. Sometimes
Okay.
if you were going someplace else, you might bring the puppet with you to the recording session because just being able to look at your puppet and know the physicality, I can imagine.
But
is
I would
helpful.
also say in any animation form, whatever you, whether it's cell or CG or this, the performance is a combination of the voice and the animator. Together, they create the performance.
Right.
So you can't separate one from the other.
No.
You always have to have them be. And we would have animators come to your recording sessions and say, "No, I need him to do blah 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 blah." Right? I mean, they would say, "Could
every
you do
once
it
in a
this
while.
way?" Every once in a while.
Mostly Henry. Yeah.
But most of the time, the animators are sketching or
Yeah.
taking notes of what he's doing so that they can do it later. Sometimes we've talked about
Video.
earlier today, you'd videotape the actor, and
Right.
the animator would have that as a guide in terms of facial expressions
Right.
or hand gestures. So it really
Well,
has
they
to be
encouraged
very,
me
Yeah, it has to
to
be very
do
connected.
as much physicalization
Yes.
Yeah.
as
Yeah.
I wanted to,
Yeah.
because it would be useful.
Absolutely.
Not that they could have controlled me. I was all over the place going.
Like we could have stopped you, Ken.
So you had also mentioned, Chris, that the script you would come up and read, for a while, but you weren't reading, one time the full script or anything. So were you beginning animation without a finished script for The Nightmare Before Christmas?
No, you just do it. And you can only get through so much in a
Yes.
session, so you don't want to. You don't need that much of it because you're going to be parsing it out to the different stages.
And I would also say in the beginning, you're still trying to find the characters.
Yeah.
So you're kind of doing, you want to record some, go animate it, see how that works, come back and say, hey, we need it to be this, or we need it that, or we want more of this, or the character's going to this. But it is not unusual. In fact, I'd say it's unusual to start any animated project with a finished script. I don't think that happens.
No, because
not in my
the
experience.
beauty of making a movie one frame at a time is you learn with each frame, and
Yeah.
so you're storyboarding everything, and things come up in storyboarding, things come up in the art department, or in the case of Nightmare, sometimes we couldn't do some of the things that the storyboarders did, so you had to basically change it because they had a sign in our workshop that said, if we can't make it, you can't have it. Because it was like they would do these crazy things, and we can't, because at that time there was no VFX, so you couldn't just put them on a wire or a rig and take the rig out later. You had to have it all in camera. So it all evolves, I think, in a really exciting way.
And I think any animated movie, truthfully, if you could figure out what the early segments that were animated, and again, whether it's stop motion or cell or CG, they're not as good as the ones that are done later.
Yep.
Because the animators have practice and they get to know who the character is, and they, there is a section of Nightmare that I always wanted to redo because it was the first thing we did, and it's okay. You all love it. But I really felt the animators got so much better at things that it would have been lovely to be able to redo it, but that didn't happen.
Will you say what section of the film?
It's the Santa
Christmas.
What's This?
Yeah.
It's the What's This was the very first section because, again, the sets didn't match any other sets in the movie, so we could just do them as one-offs. It only really involves Jack and a couple other things. It's mostly just Jack, which we had that character. So it was done first because we could, and we certainly started it well before we had any kind of finished script.
What was the quote you said? If we can't build it, you can't
Have it.
You can't have it. Well, that makes it, I feel like, correct me if I'm wrong, but particularly difficult because Tim Burton tends to design these very thin characters.
It was a
which
real
I
issue.
would
She can
assume
speak to that
Yeah.
more than I can, but it was a big issue.
Well, my
armatures.
favorite story about this is that Sally just had little shoes and these tiny little ankles in Tim's drawing, and that could not make the joint that small. So that's when we went kind of retrofitted. We said we put some socks on her and put some stripes on the socks, and so they drew in some socks.
So it could be a little wider.
It's such a charming kind of feature to her look, and so, but it came because she would not be able to stand up. With those little
Interesting
tiny
how
ankles.
necessity
Yeah,
forces
absolutely.
that kind of creativity, which in turn enhances it.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
And that's particular to stop motion because in CG or cell you can draw anything, you can do whatever.
You can cheat.
Not in stop
Yeah.
motion. You are the laws of physics apply.
Now, Ken, let's talk about Oogie Boogie for a minute.
Yes.
Sure.
So, with Oogie Boogie, I mean, he is so big and has so much personality. Was that really coming from you? Or
Yeah, it was coming from me.
Yes,
What do you
it
want?
was.
Yeah.
No, I'm
was.
teasing.
No, he's correct. No, it is because that's what I said. They're not separate items. The voice recordings and what the animator
Yeah.
does are really, if it's good, they're really married together. And certainly you were Oogie Boogie.
And we searched for that character until you came in. It was not real. It was just a drawing on a piece of paper. And
What was
you really
interesting,
did
I
love
remember them, I talk about this when you probably were in the room, and I didn't know it at the time, but they asked me, what would be your thought? I'd seen the storyboards and I'd been downstairs. And I said, well, it feels to me, and I already knew the song quotient, and I knew that was based on a Cab Calloway song, St. James Infirmary, and so on and so forth. So I knew what the feel of that was. I knew that component. And I said, well, I think it's somewhere between Bert Lahr in The Wizard of Oz and the voice of the demon in The Exorcist. and Henry and Danny went, oh, okay. And I said, if I go too far in either direction, you'll tell me. Yeah. So I just sort of kept blending those ideas and that sort of feeling. And that's how I came up with that part of it for myself. And, like I said, I'm physical, so that was my thing recording. I'm a stage performer by heart, so I had to physicalize it to do it. And that became, am I wrong? I mean, I'm assuming that
No,
became
absolutely.
part of what it was in the
It
end.
it was the guide, and I'm pretty sure that was our last segment that we
Yes.
did.
Yeah.
Oogie Boogie was the last, and I think it was because they were struggling to try to figure out what the right tone was for that. And he's the bad guy, but he's
He had to be
also
a little,
but he's
a
so
little Bert
appealing.
Lahr.
Yeah, and he has
Yeah.
to be appealing. And
Yeah,
because
exactly.
that's the heart of Tim Burton. They're monsters with
Yeah.
a heart of gold. Like he always is drawn to the monsters more than anyone
Right.
else. So
Yeah.
it was important to nail that.
Well, you always
character.
think my back thinking story was there has to be a reason why he's
Yeah.
angry with
Yeah.
everybody.
Mm-hmm.
I never figured out what it was, but I knew there was something
It's all
motivating
those
him that
bugs.
wasn't. Yeah, you're full of bugs. How happy could you be?
How happy
Feel
can you be?
But the question was, how did he get full of bugs?
Yeah, that's-
But I just thought to myself, this is a character, person, or whatever entity that is not comfortable in their own skin.
Exactly.
Right? So that's kind of how I took the idea, and that he's kind of loving being down there in the gambling den and so forth. So it was really great fun, which I think comes through You know,
Yes.
it wasn't just an evil. It
Nope.
was evil
No.
fun.
Yes.
Yeah.
And on our side, we assigned arguably our best,
Yeah.
really our best
Our
animator,
animation
which is Eric
supervisor.
Layton, who was head of animation. He was the animator for
Ah.
that and for Zero. Didn't he do Zero?
Yes. Yeah, he did a lot of Zero.
So he
Yeah.
was really our best animator, and that's who we put on that segment
Ah.
because that segment's so important to the movie as a whole.
Yeah, and that puppet was so big.
Yes.
It was really
Not
hard
easy to do. Not easy to do.
It was like,
Moving all the time. Everything's
Yeah.
moving.
that was crazy.
I remember as a kid, and I think Allison, you might have been in charge of this, if I'm remembering correctly. But as a kid visiting Disney MGM Studios, now Disney's Hollywood Studios, and they had all the sets and puppets displayed
Yes.
for a long time.
Oh,
Yes.
they came and got him.
Yeah.
They came and got him. They said, okay, we're going to come and say what you've got. They came literally to our studio and said, we want that set, we want that set,
Yeah.
we want that set, and shipped them to Florida.
But then, even at the time of making the film, like for a long time, it wasn't Walt Disney Pictures; it was Touchstone,
No,
correct?
it was,
They felt
yes.
it was too dark or something, and they didn't want it to be
They
Disney.
didn't think they could sell it.
No,
Yeah.
seriously, it was a
To kids.
huge,
They thought-
again, on my side, it was for the entire movie, every other month it was a Disney movie, it was Touchstone, it was a Disney movie, it was Touchstone. And in the end, they really felt that it had to be Touchstone because of the nature of it. However, I've always heard this, it's too scary for kids, blah, blah, blah. I have never had a parent come up to me
Never.
and tell me it was too scary for their kid. These are other people's assumptions who hadn't even seen the movie, really, who was making that. So at the time, they did release it as Touchstone, but then at some point, it went back.
Yeah.
to
Yeah, I think at home video, it went back to,
Yeah,
to
I
the
think
Disney
you're
name.
right. Yeah.
But the thing that's so fascinating about that is Disney clearly had, they felt good about it because they released it that year as the Halloween film, whereas
Yeah.
Hocus Pocus, same year, was bumped early to July so that it didn't compete with Nightmare. So Nightmare won the Hocus Pocus, the Halloween battle. So in '93.
I'm curious, just for the folks who are here, how many of you saw it when you were really young?
In theaters, yeah.
Yeah. Gets under your skin.
And did it
Pardon me?
terrify
It does,
you?
Yeah.
No.
No, it doesn't. Because ultimately, Tim's characters look scary, but they don't act scary.
Yeah.
Right.
They're kind. They care about each other. And I think kids look past
Yeah.
what they look
Yep,
like
yep.
to seeing that.
And also, their yearnings were very human.
Yeah.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Sally's and Jack's, particularly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And many people know that the singing voice of Jack Skellington is Danny Elfman, and originally Danny was recording the dialogue as well, and at some point it was decided maybe not the greatest actor, I think was the
Well,
thing.
I think he was always, obviously he was going to be doing the singing. So as we animated, it was easy to have, because we had access to Danny, number one.
Yeah.
To have Danny record it, and then we animated to it for a large part of it, not all of it. And as time went by, it seemed, that from a singing point of view, you're not going to beat Danny, but that maybe from an emotional point of view, it would be better to have, someone who, like a Chris Sarandon.
Someone who can act. Excellent. So you record some with Danny, it doesn't work out. You decide we need an actor to do the dialogue for Jack Skellington. I assume, what was like that audition process like? Did you hear, hey, here's Danny singing these songs?
Absolutely, yeah. They played, I think, three of the songs for the audition. I just went into an audition with a bunch of other people, by the way. And so I had his voice in my head, and I had to pitch up some for obvious reasons, and that was it. I have no other explanation for why I was hired.
You were perfect.
You were, and we were talking about it inside when we were sitting there. Again, this is pretty technical stuff on the recording side. It is very difficult to come in and, in animation, match the mouth and match the hand movement and match the emotion. It's a really difficult thing to do. Animators freak out at the concept that you're going to re-record what they've already animated to, and they did. And you won them over. So
Yeah.
that tells you, and I said inside, no one has ever, no review, no person, no anything has ever said, the lips don't quite work with that. He was so perfect and dead on, which I can't tell you how difficult that is.
Yeah. Well done.
Thank you very much.
So, Chris, did you feel like the character of Jack was kind of already developed at that point and you had to fit yourself into what was already recorded? Or did you really feel like you could make him your own?
To a certain extent, yes. I mean, in the songs, it was very clear that he was exuberant and full of life and completely sort of, in a way, narcissistic, Jack. But at the same time, that verve and love of finding things out and what's next and what can I find and where am I going now and oh no, that his emotional palette was very wide.
Yes.
And so it wasn't so hard to fill it in from the speaking standpoint because a lot of that was there in the songs. The songs were all amazing, and the character was very clear who he was.
Given how much time stop motion takes to create, is there ever, content that is made and not like a cutting room floor sort of situation, or is
Very
it
little.
Okay, it's like really decided.
Hopefully you've done that in your storyboards. That's why these movies, you talk about script. Animated movies are far more about storyboards than they are the script. In terms of companies that are successful, whether it's Pixar or Disney or in terms of Nightmare Before Christmas, it's really the storyboards. And so we have a whole storyboard department. We had a fantastic crew, a guy named Joe Ramft who had worked on
Genius.
and went on to work on the first 3 Toy Stories. And so he did all sorts of really well-known movies that you had known. I'd worked with Joe, you had worked with Joe. And they did the storyboards for everything. And you animate to that. That's what you start with. And the storyboards, the music, because we had the music first. So we did a lot of those sequences first. Hopefully, you don't have a lot that's on the cutting floor.
Yeah.
You do. There's always, you're going to, tighten up things at the end, and that's always part of the process. But it's not like in live action where you shoot something 10 times and you'll cut it together later. It's not that process. I'm not sure if you're aware of how this is animated. So we had sets of heads. There was Angry Jack, Happy Jack,
So the
Singing
brows.
Jack, and so the mouth would be sculpted differently on each of these heads.
Yeah.
We had specialty heads. If he was doing something really crazy, we would do. But it's not big by any means. There's a little hole here. They literally screwed on top of the puppet.
Yeah, pop it on top.
That's how you do it.
Because someone would beforehand basically do all the mouth shapes. So A-E-I-O-U with angry eyes, A-E-I-O-U with happy face.
Dan Mason.
Dan Mason. Yeah, that's right. And so basically they would know that every time you popped a head on, it would animate perfectly. So you knew what phonetically the words were, and you picked the head that matched those mouth shapes. So there were hundreds of heads.
It was like 400 and something like that.
Yeah, Jack heads.
And then every animator had to have their set that went with their puppet. So
we did some clay. Didn't we do some clay?
the only clay was like the guy that was like mushy.
Because you mentioned clay before. We had somebody with...
But it wasn't even clay, it was wax.
Yeah, we did some characters' mouths differently. Like if they were only in one or two scenes, we might do them differently.
Yeah, because claymation is where you're sculpting the every frame is sort of sculpted a little bit differently, whereas we were making them, casting them, having them be painted and finished, and then you would just pop them on as you needed them.
And I'll move this out to the sun. This is a little umbrella.
For the witches.
With the witches?
Yes,
you would know this better than I do. But the witches carried it. And you can tell there's literally detail in it. Even something this small would have extraordinary detail to it. So it's really not a smart way to do a movie. It really isn't. We love it.
I don't know.
God. But you did more than I did.
But also it shows you why storyboards are so important, because if you did not prepare to have an umbrella, there would be no umbrella. Like Tim understood that because he had worked in stop motion, but like
he loves stop motion.
When I worked on The Fantastic Mr. Fox, Wes was a live action guy, and he'd go, I want a different telephone. You're like, we didn't make a different telephone. We made that telephone, and we made it this big. So it is a real, like, you need to know exactly what's going to be in every frame so that someone can build it so that it works and you can use it.
That's fascinating. Ken, let's start down at this end. I want to hear your impressions. We'll go down the line. When you saw the finished film, when was the first time you saw it, and what was your impression of it?
The first time I saw it was at Lincoln Center
Oh, wow.
Yeah, in New York. And I had no, well, you do your part. You don't know what the rest of it. And it absolutely brought me to tears because I realized in my little autistic heart that I was part of something that was really, really extraordinary. And I didn't know it ahead of time. I thought I'd had a job, you know what I mean? I had another gig.
Yeah.
But when I saw it, I thought this, and I didn't know that it would go on for 30 years, 31 years as it has, but I knew it was something extraordinary. And I really sat there thinking how fortunate, and I thank the two of you and others, how fortunate I was to be brought to it, because here we are, 31 years later, still talking about it. And I remember sitting there thinking somewhere in my mind that how lucky I had been to be chosen to be part of it. Could have been anybody, so to speak.
It could have been no one, but yeah.
Oh, shucks. But you know what I mean. Just to sit there and see something finished and see everybody's work and realize how lucky.
Yeah.
That was my reaction.
Chris, how about for you? Was that the same first
I
time?
saw it the first time in, I guess, unusual circumstances, not the fully realized movie. I got a VHS
Oh, yeah.
of
good
a
old days.
black and white
Tells you what
cut,
antiquated technology we were
Yeah.
using.
right, of the final cut of the movie with a time code on the bottom, right? Because I was going to go back in the studio and do a few
couple of things.
loops with
Yeah.
Tim. And I'm sitting there because there were a couple of things that I had in mind that I did, and I thought I'd like to redo this. And so I was taking notes, right? And I put the VHS in the machine, and the machine starts up, and I was in Los Angeles shooting another movie, and my kids were with me, and they were then at the time, like, I don't know, 8, 6, and 4, or 3, something like that. And so I'm watching the movie, and suddenly I realize there are people in the room with me. And I turn around, and my 3 kids are standing literally just behind me, and they're like this.
Yeah.
Because they had never seen anything
Yeah.
like it before. And that's when I thought, okay. I mean, it looks, it was very basic. And they were watching it in black and white, for God's sake. And they were transfixed. And I thought, okay. I get it now.
Now, Kathleen, for you, I'm sure it was a bit of a different experience. One of the there's a George Lucas quote, and I'm paraphrasing, but people talk to him about Star Wars all the time. Oh my God, I love that movie; it's incredible. And he goes, "It's funny, I never got to see Star Wars because Star Wars for me, like, I was too involved to have the same experience." So, Kathleen, was that perhaps?
So for me, any producer, especially if you're in the dub and you're doing this stuff, by the time the movie is actually done, I've probably seen it 35 times. And frankly, I'm kind of jaded at that point. But my experience was, a really close friend of mine, we're still friends, her son was probably 4 or 5 at the time. And I said, well, why don't you bring Dylan, as many children of that era are called, to the screening? And the same experience, and it was, up on the screen in color, and he sat cross-legged on the end of his chair like this, literally leaning into the screen. I don't think he blinked. I was watching him more than I was watching the movie, and it was then that I understood, just like you, oh dear, oh my goodness.
What we have here.
This is something, because, again, nothing then, and I would contend since, looks like that. Nothing really looks like that. Certainly before that, because even Jason the Argonauts or Rudolph or whatever, they're not to that the production values are not to that
Nowhere
extent.
near.
And we were discussing that there's also a handmade quality about Nightmare Before Christmas that I think really people can
respond
connect
to.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what he was doing. He was like this the whole time. And that's when I went, okay, I don't really get to be jaded about this. Okay, I've seen it 35 times. This is going to be pretty cool. And it was, of course. Yeah.
Allison, how about for you?
Well, you would,
I agree. I feel like 35 is. I feel like it's 350 times is probably more like it.
Probably.
And I too feel like I just see all the either the mistakes or the hardship or that light that fell out or whatever it is. So you start to see it. But I was also at Lincoln Center.
Yeah.
And I got to bring like my family, and I actually brought my my grandmother, who was probably like '89 or something. And I remember like just being so moved to watch it with my family. And then my grandmother says to me after the lights came up, she went, "That looked like a lot of work." That was a lot of work. Daddy, but like she was so, we were all like so like euphoric.
It was nice
my
that you
grandma was like,
recognized
she's
that.
like, "Oh my goodness, we should have been nicer to you for the last few years because that was a lot of work." So it was pretty magical to see it with an audience.
What I was thinking when my comrades were speaking, one of the things I was most impressed with was, as a recording process, you might do 10 takes of a line, you might do 5, you might do 20. And then you go see the movie, and I didn't work with anybody, ever.
Yeah.
I was alone,
right, you're right.
And you go see the movie, and it's like you were together, you were recording together. So that means out of those 20 takes, say it's a scene with 2 characters, say Oogie and Jack, out of those 40 takes, we'll say for both of us, they pick the ones that sound the best, and it's you talking to each other. And as an actor, I know it's hard enough to, and I remember thinking, how on earth did they do that? For the whole film to make it and put it together. So to what you were saying, I think Henry in the booth, I don't know this for sure, but I have a sense that he had a sense of what was already sequencing towards what he wanted as a finished thing, correct? And I think, to me, the wonder I had of working with he and Danny in the booth was that they were so alive. And I was able, thank God, to keep up with them because they were very fast and very quick.
Yeah,
and they would say, do it again, but sound more anguished. And I was, okay, get out, something. And we just kept going like that.
Yeah.
But then you still don't know what the performance is going to be till you see it.
Yeah.
So I credit Henry Selick with that. Whoever else might have had a hand in it.
Well,
right?
I think that directing animation is a different animal because
Yes.
you have
All
to,
of animation is that experience. Any actor recording CGI, cell,
and any
whatever, is
animator
that.
as well, because you have to act a performance, and it's not always the same animator in sequence, and so people have to be able to sort of swan into a performance, but keep that consistency. So
And the
director is
animators
so
are very
important.
rarely at the recording sessions. Very rarely.
No, I never
That's what
saw
the director
anybody.
said.
The only person I ever was in the booth with was Henry.
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't recall any animated.
Yeah. It's a miracle.
But
Yeah.
it's
a miracle.
also interesting to me that one of the things that I found fun about it was that I wasn't being, Henry would give me line readings because he had it in his head where it was going.
Yeah.
But then he would say, give me 3, just whatever.
Yeah.
Give me 10 of these. Try this line 5 different ways. And so what it forces you to do, I just got out of the recording booth doing one of Disney's video games, right?
Cool.
And the guy who was directing me, Ben Hoppy?
Yeah.
Ben?
No, Ben Hop.
Yeah.
Anyway, Ben would give me a suggestion and say, okay, just do, 5 or 6 things. And it forces you to become the ultimate kind of improviser.
Yeah.
Because even though you're not improvising the words, you're improvising the intention and the emotion and everything. And so it's really kind of freeing.
Yeah.
It's really kind of fun. You're just going, oh, okay, you've cut me loose.
Well, I was telling them the same thing, that whatever the thing is. And I said, when I got finished, I said, this was better than a year of therapy. You know what I mean? You really get to, right?
Yeah.
You get to do all of these things from your inner core and your inner intentions and your inner thing, and it's quick and it's fast. And you get done and you're like, that was good.
Yeah.
You
It's
feel very
exciting
exercised.
in a lot of ways. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I also feel like it's a testament to your voices because you aren't able to rely on your face or your costume or the set or anything like that. So you're really conveying so much in a black box, in a room with no one else, and it's such a testament.
Well, I also like to say, Chris and I have talked about this. When you're a kid and you're in your bedroom or wherever, and you're playing with your little toys, you're going, "How about that? I'm going to get you if you got to." That's what we do.
It prepared you.
Yeah,
It
that's
prepared you
great.
for Nightmare Before Christmas.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
Having that freedom that children
that
have. to
imagination to go anywhere
Yeah.
and try anything.
I think
great.
also if you think about that cast for that movie, and Danny and the writer Caroline Thompson, they were all people who had worked with Tim. Henry had worked with Tim. Tim knew that he could not be on that set. He was making big-time Batman movies.
Yeah.
And he knew he could not be there. So he really placed the movie in the hands. Rick Heinrichs was our art director, and he was Tim's art director on many, many things. He placed the movie in people he trusted. Tim had also worked with Joe Rampt, who was our story guy. So they were all representatives of Tim. So it all stems from Tim, but Henry and those people all carried it forward for him.
Chris, you just mentioned a video game, and obviously this franchise has lived on far beyond the film. And I'd love to talk a little bit about this. I mean, we got Haunted Mansion Holiday, we got video games, we got lots of projects. For the two of you, when's the last time you performed the role of your characters?
Last week, right?
Yeah, I did a session. Yeah, I did a session last week.
Yeah,
Wow.
me as well.
Yeah,
For a video game.
That's great.
Yeah, it's
for
a racing
a car
thing.
game. Yeah.
Excellent.
You as well?
Yes,
last
same
week?
thing.
That's excellent.
Wow.
Yeah, I keep getting to go back.
And I
This
don't
movie
know.
never stops, does it?
Never. Thank God.
I know, right?
It never
Well
stops.
done.
And I can tell you, I don't think we all loved the movie. And the crew of this movie had wanted to do stop motion since they had whatever. But nobody thought it would have legs like this. We are as surprised as anybody. We're thrilled, and it's so exciting. But at the time, we loved the movie. We thought it would be good and do well. But this has been well beyond anybody's.
and it's because of you.
Yeah, absolutely.
True.
Yeah.
Very, very true.
So you say, this movie continues on, but I'm curious, have we ever gotten close to a legitimate sequel?
Well, I don't think so.
I don't think so. I don't
I don't
know.
think so.
I mean, Tim had this idea, like, when he was a kid, that he would, like, transpose the night before Christmas to the Nightmare Before Christmas. So it's kind of like we've all had these crazy ideas when we were little, but he really kept it at the forefront of his head. And then when he made this movie, I think it was such a culmination of that vision that he had for the movie, and I think he really is happy with how it
Yeah,
came out.
I don't
So
think he's thought of that. I
No.
really don't.
I don't think so either.
And
I wonder if Disney has, though, because I'm sure they could do it without him if they wanted.
no, I don't,
I don't think
well,
they would.
No, I don't think so.
You can't.
I would hope not.
You
but-
I don't
can't.
think you can do this without Tim.
No.
I mean, and quite possibly contractually can't do it without
Yeah.
Tim. So it may be that it doesn't happen. Yes, that's true.
And I think that the story, I feel like this is a movie about a midlife crisis. So it does feel like, and we all, I think that's one of the reasons it has the legs it does, is because we can all as humans can relate to being at a crossroads and feeling like I don't like what I do because it's familiar, and then you need something new in your life. So I think that it told the story he wanted to tell. That was kind of front of mind. I always thought that there was some potential in the other holidays.
Yeah.
Oh, the other
That-
doors and the...
That feels like there could be, but no, it would be too different. So no sequels.
Now, Ken, you've done some fun stuff at the Hollywood Bowl. Chris, you've not taken part in any
No.
of this, have you?
No.
Can you talk a little bit about the Hollywood Bowl performances and...
Yeah, we do these things where we sing the score live while they play the film. And
Yeah.
there's a symphony orchestra who plays it
So
live
fun.
and so forth. It's thrilling, I can
It
tell
is
you.
really
It's
fun.
thrilling. And it's beautiful. And there's this wonderful Sandy Cameron who comes on and plays the violin.
She's amazing.
Isn't she amazing?
She's like a,
And it's
yeah.
like she's not part of what we knew to be Nightmare
Yes.
Before, unless she's completely
Taken it.
that.
Yeah.
More so than
She's
some of us,
so good.
But anyway, it's a thrilling experience. We've done, I think, the Hollywood Bowl 3 or 4 times. We've done the Wembley Stadium
Oh,
in
wow.
London 3 times. We're going
Really?
back
Wow.
top of December. Mexico's close. We're going to be in Monterey, Mexico one night, Halloween.
Oh wow.
Go to Mexico, be there.
It's worth it.
It's
if
worth
you
it.
can catch
It'll be
It's
pretty off the
amazing.
hook, I think.
Yeah.
But it's to be able to take that other step with it in terms of the music is for a performer, and I think for the audience, it's a really thrilling extension of what we know as the film. Because you really do get to appreciate the score, because you get to hear it live played. The movie, you watch it, there it is. But to actually hear musicians playing this amazing score, never mind the songs, the score is
Yeah, it's very
amazing.
special.
And you really do get to hear it when you see these performances, these concert performances.
Now, we saw some of Kathleen's little souvenirs from the film before. I'm curious, for the other 3, do you have any souvenirs that you either were given or perhaps maybe stolen?
Oh,
Stolen never, come on. No, I don't think they were available to be stolen at any
No.
time. The dice. The dice.
Oh,
I was
great.
given the dice with the snake coming through.
And I was given by this very generous woman to my left. I think you gave me 4 of the heads.
The jack heads,
I have
yeah.
4 of the jack heads, and I have the blackboard.
Oh, cool.
Oh, great.
yeah,
The
yeah.
blackboard that Jack tries to figure
That's so
everything
cool.
out on. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's in terrible shape.
Yeah.
A lot of the stuff from Nightmare is in
Yeah.
terrible shape because it was a long time ago and the
Well,
material
it wasn't
still
built
holds
to,
up.
you know,
No, it
go
lasts.
forever.
No,
but,
the work is just so
Yeah.
fine.
but a lot of the puppets still Disney pulls them out for various things, and they
Oh,
keep
yeah?
them in the Disney archive,
Yeah.
and they really take good care of them so that they're
Oh,
actually.
great.
I think there's something on in London now. It's a Tim Burton something.
Oh yeah.
Well, he
His
has
art.
that show that
Like
goes
his art.
around.
Yeah.
So. But honestly, Kathleen, I got to give you a shout out because they were gonna like scrap
Yeah.
everything from the movie, and it was like what? Like these are such beautiful little works of art, and
Oh,
we really
the
like.
sets.
I remember there was that area of the shop, and people were coming, and we were allowing them to pick
I was,
two things.
I worked.
and it was like
Because I had worked at Disney, like I say, they weren't looking for a Disney producer, just how it worked out. But because of that, I did have connections, and I believe that is why a lot of that stuff ended up in Florida,
Yes.
because we were saying, you got to take this. This is a whole
Yes.
thing. And the one thing Disney is very good about is promoting their movies and
Marketing.
merchandising and marketing
Yeah.
their movies. They take it very seriously. And so they literally came, picked what they wanted, we packed it up and shipped it to Florida. But there was tons of stuff left, and you're like, well, we're not putting this in dumpsters.
Yeah.
Come on.
It was
and
too
so
much.
we gave the crew, everybody got to pick stuff. We tried to send everything to actors, anybody who was involved with the
Yeah.
movie.
And-
We got stuff for them.
And I on all my subsequent movies, I've made that we have to do it. That's what we did. That's the norm is to do
That's what we
that.
do.
you know what? It
And,
is a
and
Disney-
it started on Nightmare because of your.
But also, I
foresight.
inherited that because on Disney, for years, I mean, going back to the 30s, they would give the animators cells. You could take your some of
think
your
I have one
artwork
cell,
home.
yeah.
Right. You have one cell. That they would do that stuff. So, great, I did it, but it really was a tradition of the Walt Disney Company to give the crew something that was done for the movie.
Yeah, but traveling with the sets also was genius, and I feel like Leica really
Yes.
embrace every time they make a movie. It's like the art and the magic. It's like, oh yeah, it all started with Kathleen right here. The magic.
The Nightmare Before Christmas really started this. I don't know if it was necessarily the first, but this whole Christmas meets Halloween sort of thing has blown up. Plug Creep It Real Festive coming right here in November.
Soon.
But it's pretty wild how normal the mashup of horror, Christmas, Halloween has become. And I think that's really wild. The last question I'm going to ask you, and I'm not going to go easy on you with this one. You cannot answer both. Starting with Allison, working the way down. Nightmare Before Christmas, Halloween movie or Christmas movie? You cannot say both.
Oh, interesting. Good question.
I would say it is a Halloween movie.
All right.
Ah.
It's about the monster within and the monster with the heart of gold. So I feel like it's a Halloween movie.
If there's a tie, I'll be the tiebreaker, but I'm really curious to see how this goes.
I think of it as a Christmas movie.
All right.
I think the spirit of it.
Well, Ken and I have an answer together. Ready?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
It wasn't both.
It
Wasn't both, right?
Yeah.
Well, then I'll be I go with Halloween simply because we have so many Christmas classic options that I don't want it to get lost in that shuffle. And I forget, I think I was saying to Allison maybe earlier that, it's so funny. You say to somebody, hey, what's your favorite movie? And they'll answer, I don't know, Titanic, whatever it is. It's like, oh, how often do you watch it? Every few years. Then you say, what's your favorite Christmas movie? What's your favorite Halloween movie? How often do you watch that? And the answer is always every year.
Yeah.
So it may
Or
not be their
more.
favorite movie of all time, but because it's, so ingrained in this one time of season or year, it lives on and it just plays over and over and over again.
Well, I actually think there have been obviously other Halloween movies and/or Christmas, but I think Nightmare Before Christmas captured the joy of Halloween.
Yeah.
I mean, as a kid, Halloween was my favorite. So, trick or treat, candy food, dress up, all the things. And I think it's the only movie that I can think of. There's scary, chop them up kind of things. But I think it's the only movie that captures the joy
Yes.
of what Halloween can be and is,
and the
right?
heart, and the heart
And the
of
heart.
Halloween.
The heart.
Sounds like
giving, giving.
Sounds like Ken thinks it's a Halloween movie.
I think so.
Just saying.
Except he was talking about giving, which I think
That's
is
right. It's very
Christmas.
Christmas.
Beautiful. I'm going to end it there. Folks, thanks so much for joining us
Thank you,
today.
guys.
Thank you to all the panelists.
I hope you enjoyed that conversation. Now, folks, since October has arrived, that means that there are 31 new episodes of That Halloween Podcast being released this month. So be sure to follow That Halloween Podcast wherever you listen to this podcast. Each day, I'll be discussing a different Halloween movie or TV special with a different guest. And yes, there are several Disney titles and special guests throughout the month. In fact, the first episode of the season features Billy Butcherson himself, actor Doug Jones, as we discuss Hocus Pocus 2. Also, if you're a fan of the Halloween Christmas mashup in The Nightmare Before Christmas and you live in Southern California, consider joining me at Creep It Real Festive this November 22nd and 23rd at the Heritage Museum of Orange County, where you can experience the dark side of the holidays. This is the sister event of Creep It Real OC, which you just heard a live panel from. Learn more at creepitrealoc.com. This episode has been executive produced by Jeffrey Riccio. Gain rewards like Jeffrey, including access to never-before-heard episodes and live stream Ask Me Anythings, by visiting the Patreon link in this episode's description. Until next time, anything you need can be found in this episode's description, from the DCTC hotline where you can leave a voicemail and be heard on a future episode, contact info to reach me, some free gifts from me to you, and so much more. So be sure to check out this episode's description. Other than that, folks, have a magical day. Bye!